Imagine you want to teach your U19 a crossing and heading skill. How would you design a training session for that in accordance with the tactical periodization approach? In this video, we are going to consider how to do this. As you remember, every training session should comply with 6 tactical periodization principles. If not, please take a look at the video that describes each of those principles. Most critical and those that you should think about in the first place are the principles of specificity and propensity. Let's first consider the principle of specificity. This principle claims that the content of our training session should specifically represent our game model or our style of play. So, we want to teach our team a heading skill. Imagine one of our game model principles states that we should make use of high crosses into the penalty box and score with a header. But this principle might be inappropriate for a team that consists of only short and adult strikers. When it comes to a heading skill, being short involves a certain degree of physical disadvantage, whereas being an adult implies that it might be more difficult to learn a new skill. In this case, you have two options. Either choose a different team or adjust your game model. It is totally fine to adjust your game model since it's never stable and can always be altered. But let us proceed from premise that your team involves tall and young players and is appropriate for a game model. Your training session should also comply with the second most important principle, which is the principle of propensity. This principle states that we need to create practices in which desired actions occur frequently during the training session. So, if you want to teach a heading skill, there obviously should be a lot of headers in your training session. To summarize, it is important that you design a training session that is specific to a game model and that specific actions occur frequently. A typical training session schedule is usually composed of a warm-up, the main part, and the final game. Let's first start with the warm-up. A warm-up is carried out at low to medium intensity and aims to increase body temperature by preparing players for training session. Let's have a look at an example of a warm-up drill. First of all, remember that the exercise should be specific and desired action should occur frequently. An example of a good warm-up exercise would be playing only with hands in a restricted playing area. To win a point, a player has to pass back with a head to his teammate. As you see, the exercise is specific to teaching a heading skill and the actions occur very frequently. A progression of an exercise might again include playing only with hands, but with goalkeepers and by trying to score a header. Again, all actions here are specific and frequent. Okay, those were just the warm-up exercises, but let's now consider the main part of the training session. The main part should always be conducted at a high intensity. Remember that players always play the way they train. This is where most of the coaching takes place. Let's now consider an example of the main part drill. In this example, two teams play on 4 goals without goalkeepers as shown in the figure. Here it is not allowed to score with the foot, only with the header, and only headers from at least 20-meter distance are allowed. Here you can interrupt and coach your players certain crossing and heading skills. Again, this is specific because we teach crossing and headers. And secondly, all actions are frequent since all players do is try to score a header. Okay, that's what about the main part, but let's have a look at the final game of our training session. The final game should be played at a very high intensity and is typically continuous with less coaching in comparison to the main part. Let's have a look at an example of a final game according to the tactical periodization approach. Here you can let a team play just a normal game with 2 goalkeepers. However, a normal goal scored by foot costs only 1 point, whereas a cross from a wide channel followed by a header will result in a 5 points advantage. Again, this is very specific to the heading skill, and headers are supposed to occur frequently because players are motivated by a potential 5 points advantage. Okay, now you have a complete example of a training session according to the tactical periodization approach. Let's just make sure that we do not compromise any of the rest of the principles. And let's start with the principle of systematic repetition. According to this principle, it is not enough to conduct such a training session just once. Such a session might be repeated several times per month to maintain performance and shape the understanding of our game model. Okay, let's now have a look at the principle of complex progression. As you remember, the vertical progression should always start from simple to more complex principles. If one of our main principles states that a team should make use of a counterattack that might comprise crossing and heading, then we should first start by teaching how to cross and head, and not with a more complex counterattacking behavior. Regarding horizontal progression, we should always proceed from more to less prioritized principles. If we claim that equality pressing behavior is one of the most important principles of our game model, whereas counterattacking is slightly less prioritized, then we should first start by teaching our team how to press, and only afterward how to counterattack with its crossing and heading elements. Here we might also have like 10 training sessions per month for coaching the pressing skill, while only 3 or 4 for coaching crossing and heading, for example. Okay, the next principle is the principle of fatigue and concentration. This principle claims that there is a need for appropriate management of players' fatigue and concentration levels. To maintain players' concentration, you may add some variation to your daily practices. For instance, instead of playing on 4 goals without goalkeepers as we did in our main part, there can be 2 goals with goalkeepers, and scoring at one of them will cost 5 points, for example. Secondly, as you remember, the middle of the week corresponds to the main learning period of the game model. So conducting our demanding training session on Tuesday and Saturday will be inappropriate because those days are just for recovery and activation. However, it is totally fine to conduct it on Thursday, which is the main learning day of our game model. Okay, let's now have a look at the last principle, which is the principle of performance stabilization. This principle relates to the physical component and claims that throughout the week there should be an alteration in the dominant pattern of players' muscle contraction. Because Wednesday corresponds to strength, Thursday to endurance, and Friday to speed training sessions. Again, it would be inappropriate to carry out our session on Wednesday or Friday, but it's totally legitimate to conduct it on Thursday. Okay, that's it for today. Now you know how to design your training session according to the tactical periodization methodology. You can apply the same principle to design sessions for pressing, counterattacking, and so on. Stay tuned for further videos, and thanks for watching.